Welcome to the Dr. Mary Lauder podcast show, where we explore the messy, magical, and deeply human journey of healing. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Lauder, a board-certified osteopathic physician, an accidental shaman, and a lifelong student of human experience. Together, we're going to talk medicine, wellness, and culture in a way that's grounded, perhaps maybe a bit cheeky, but always from the heart. And don't miss Gadgets, Gimmicks, and Gotchas, my reoccurring segment where we lovingly call out the fluff and highlight the stuff that actually works. So grab your favorite brew, coffee, matcha, or that mysteriously green smoothie and settle in. It's time to get this party started with a strong dose of soul medicine. Welcome to the Dr. Mary Lauder podcast show. Today we have a very special guest. Our guest is Lynne Goldberg, and she comes from Montreal. I'm glad that you're here today. Our episode is gentle, powerful, and an invitation to pause. As Lynne will take us through as a celebrated mediation teacher and co-founder of the Breathe app, whose journey into mindfulness began in the depths of personal loss. She'll take us through her story. And we understand how meditation became a lifeline and a gateway of transformation, not a fix, not a task, but a way to come home to ourselves. So if you've been moving through uncertainty, reinvention, or grief, and if you're simply longing for a more calm and clarity conversation, this is the space to find that. So welcome to our conversation together. Enjoy. Welcome, Lynne. It's lovely to have you, our neighbor to the north in Canada, up in Montreal, and here in Michigan. So it's lovely to be that close, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on to the Dr. Mary Lauder podcast show. We have a variety of people who listen to us, anywhere people looking for clinical answers to life stories. And I think yours falls in both categories. And so I thought that was really, really fun to delve into because you've been through the mill and you've also have been very resilient. And so that's really pretty awesome. So why don't you start us where you'd like us to begin in an area that you feel comfortable with and explain to us who and what you are and what you do.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. Um, so I started meditating when my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, and at the time, which was close to 30 something years ago, her doctor suggested that she tried meditation, and I thought, it can't hurt. I was going through infertility, and people just kept telling me, relax, relax. If you just relax, you'll get pregnant. And I was like, "Well, you try relaxing when your feet are up in stirrups and you're trying." So for me, it was not so self-evident, but I really started loving it. And I used to meditate with like John Kabat-Zinn with actually to date myself with earphones on and a tape recorder as I was in my doctor's office. So many, many, many years ago. And, uh, and then found that it was something that really was part of my daily practice. And, not it wasn't so obvious at first. At first, it was more like, I would wake up and my heart would be pounding and I would meditate to get back to sleep. I call that my emergency meditator phase. And I slowly inched into it. And my mom died. I did get pregnant. I lost twin girls. I ended up losing my job, and then my marriage fell apart. So it was a perfect storm of just many, many events. And meditation was what helped me. And it really got me through that period of time. And it also at that particular time was where I started to recognize that maybe I lost all of my identities. I wasn't a mother, I wasn't a daughter, I wasn't a wife, I wasn't anything. So who was I? So there was that inkling of like, oh, well, I guess, I can't really put my finger on that yet. And I started noticing um, that I started to have this sense of uh, the feeling that I could choose different interesting types of now I call it an archetype, but at the time I didn't have the language for it. But I did recognize that if I wanted to reinvent myself, which seemed like it was a pretty good idea because my life was decimated, I thought, okay, well, let's see what I want to actually do with my life right now. So at that point, I I was using meditation far more, and the business side of my brain, which had been sort of on hold for a period of time while I was going through all the infertility and everything, was more interested in having this meditation be developed. So I started, studying a little bit more and ended up becoming a meditation teacher and then thinking, "Oh, this is interesting. This really is helping me." I did eventually remarry, have kids, and think, "Oh, if this is helping me so much, imagine what this would do if the kids could learn this." And of course, my kids didn't wanna learn anything from me. So I thought, I think I'm gonna start going into schools and try to teach the teachers so that they could teach my kids how to meditate. And I ended up doing that until they asked me for something that I could leave behind. And
Mm,
I didn't know what to do. I was, very, very I had tapes. So I would leave them tapes. And eventually that became the app. And that's
mm.
really how the app became what it is today. So, yeah, and now we're in 90 countries and we're translated into many different languages, and it's really amazing to me how this has become something that can be so accessible. So, that was that.
Yes. So what did you do before everything hit the fan?
I was a retailer for many, many years. I ran a retail business while I was trying to have kids, and then I ended up being running a wholesale business for many years after that, traveling all over the world. I really had a very um, business-minded background, and it was fun for me. I loved it
Yeah.
until I didn't.
Yes. Yes. And then with, the passing of your mom and
Mhm.
the dissolving of your marriage, what age was that? How old were you?
Oh, I would say 38-ish.
Yeah. We were just before we jumped on this, we were talking about Saturn returns, so that would have been your first Saturn return of when life could really grab your attention to complete things in adulthood that need to be repeated and completed. And then the second Saturn return occurs around age 58 to 62. So,
Bingo.
okay, so dusting and sweeping, what, now is and, I went through my Saturn return, second Saturn return, last few years, and,
Okay.
one of the big completions was in my story, one of the things I did was, in when I was in university, I was quite religious. I wouldn't say it was faith-based, but it was pretty legalistic.
I
And there's
see.
a lot of things in my life I let go of that were really a part of me in order to fit in. So belonging versus fitting in are 2 distinct things, and I gave up a lot of things to fit in.
Mm.
And that happened on a particular at University of Montana in Missoula, and on, full circle, then going into my second Saturn return, one of the things I gave up was a lot of rock and roll, right?
Oh,
Because this is what you do, but the point of this is then, and there I was on campus getting rid of all my rock and roll when I was 18 and blah, blah, blah. So there I am, second Saturn return, University of Montana campus in the summer when classes start, going to a Pink concert and rocking and rolling in the football stadium, having a fantastic time and totally reclaiming everything that I was and had when I was 18.
Oh, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I love that.
And so, and interesting for meditation,
Mm,
describe your app because a lot of people think meditation's hard.
mm,
A lot of people think they can't sit still. There's the monkey mind that goes along with that. There is, just the whole concept of it takes too long to learn.
mm.
So let's dispel some of those myths. How did you encounter those? How did you tackle those? What did you do?
Well, one of the things that was really helpful for me was recognizing that I was normal. There was
Yeah.
this myth that somehow I was doing it wrong and everybody else was doing it right. But once, I started becoming familiar with what it was, what I realized was the most common refrain was, "What's for dinner? What do I need to do on my to-do list? Did I, that a-hole that did what's, someone cut me off in traffic," was what my refrain was on a regular basis, and the practice for me wasn't having the dialogue, that internal dialogue, it was the coming back to the breath every time I caught myself. And very often it was, 10 minutes could go by before I caught myself, but it was that catching myself that became the practice. And so that was really important for me to explain to people regularly that, there is no such thing as doing this wrong. The fact that you are sitting here practicing, it's like playing the piano. It's a muscle. You will train yourself and over and over again, kind of like a little puppy. And each time you do catch yourself and you do come back to whatever the object of your attention is, you're meditating. That's all there is to it. So it's not so mysterious.
You're right, it's not. That's actually an excellent explanation. So, the awareness is the fact that you come back to breath and you're aware
Or
that or
or whatever.
or whatever
It could
you're
be a mantra, it
yeah,
could be a body scan or whatever it happens to be.
and
Right?
so with the awareness of that, that itself becomes the practice of awareness.
There you go.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Excellent. So how did the kids fare, the students in school? What did you notice with that?
I noticed that kids are a lot more receptive than their parents might have been.
Mm,
And that, kids had very open minds. They were curious, they were interested, they weren't so full of self-judgment, and they really wanted to learn something that was interesting to them. And it was kind of fun. And we would practice with all different sounds. And so they were excited when they caught the sound and they were interested. When we did it with kids, we made it so that it was something that they could focus their attention on, and in that particular experiment or, practice, it was sound-based, but there were many different types. There was, pictures that we did with kids or, often different exercises so that they had to pay attention,
mhm,
and it was fun for them.
mhm.
Kids were fun. And practicing with kids is fun because there's something very exciting about seeing a little kid get all, animated about something new that they're learning.
Yes. So then did your kids, your kiddos, your 2 your children pick it up then eventually?
Not from me.
Yeah. Are they just full any peeking behind the curtain, are they meditators today?
My daughter will meditate from time to time. She understands what to do. It's not her regular practice.
Yeah.
My son, although he will never admit to it, does have a regular practice of mindfulness, and he's quite disciplined about it. And then one son lost class. Just
Okay.
gave up.
Sounds like the cobbler's kids in shoes.
Yeah.
The doctor's kids that never, "Oh, you're fine, you're not dead. The transfusion you belong here." Yes. Exactly. So, there's so much, in the literature about the value of meditation.
Yeah.
And so then putting it so simply well, simple is different than easy. So I wanna make sure you understand that from where the perspective I'm coming from there. But so simply to put it on an app that's available, that transformation, focus, awareness could be as simple as holding something in your hand as a tool.
Yeah.
So did people was that kind of hard from a business standpoint to share with people to, were they trying to think it was harder than that and it couldn't be this easy and
Well, in 2014, which is when we launched the app,
Mhm.
meditation wasn't really a thing.
Yeah, and
So just the awareness. Now it's, everybody talks about mindfulness, meditation, and thankfully so, because, that's a wonderful tool that is much more accessible to a lot more people right now. But at the time, it was, like, something that weirdos did.
Mhm.
And so it was fun to explain to people, "Well, not weird, just, a wonderful, wonderful tool." What I find interesting today is that from my perspective, you know, in 2014, teaching people to meditate was teaching people how to be calm. That was what people were most interested in,
Okay.
right? People were interested in finding calm, sleeping at night, things that what kept them up at night.
Mhm.
And today, I think that as that's evolving, and that's really where what I'm excited about, it's far more than just teaching people how to get calm.
Mhm.
To me now, this is a tool of self-awareness,
Mhm.
and it becomes the ability to really understand yourself in a very profound way and understand what patterns are coming up over and over and over again, so that you don't have to repeat them, and that in itself is real freedom. So when you talk about liberation or, depending on how you describe that, there's a very interesting tool. I call it, what's on your playlist. And if you keep getting the same songs over and over again,
Mhm.
then, you know, time to time to switch the records.
Yeah, you're kinda stuck in a loop, aren't you?
Mm,
And so it's interesting because I heard someone say the other day that, the universe, when you're trying to, um, uplift your life, up
yep.
spiral your life, I would think meditation would be a key component of that, the
Mhm.
awareness. And then in terms of, like, manifesting, and
Mm,
I'm not saying give me a red sports car. I'm saying, how can, our lives be better? Yeah, we want abundance. Yes, we want health. Yes, we want solid relationships. All those things are things that we can have as, in common as a common humanity, right? But the universe is not directed morally. And so the same thing with this meditation, it's not driven by a belief system or a set of rules or a religion, which is man's approach to a belief system or a faith. And so it really can sit in this area that people can really, really adapt what you've got for them to really take it and run, right?
absolutely. What I find interesting is I think people put different language on depending on how they're oriented.
Yeah.
So, and that's the book that I'm in the process of writing right now is speaking different languages to different people so that it's adaptable to, if you tend to be science-based, then I understand that that's the way you're going to interpret information. And if you tend to be spiritually driven, that's going to be another lens that you might put on it. But ultimately, everybody's saying the same thing in different languages. And so it's just finding the language that resonates.
Mhm. Oh, that's fascinating. So, if so let's follow through on that app. If folks want to get involved with that, is that a monthly or do they purchase and then there's upgrades or how does that sort through?
Yeah, it's a monthly based app,
Mhm.
and or you could buy it, there's a lifetime membership as well, so it's at your discretion, and it's a tool. It's one more tool,
Yeah.
and I think that having tools at our disposal that are simple and easy to use is really important because when life gets complicated, we don't wanna start getting complicated too, you know?
Yeah. And it just strikes me as something that people can have that they can reach for no matter what. That's what it strikes me. It just feels so, hearing about this, and being intrigued by it just feels like something that's just so readily available that would be such a help and support.
Absolutely true. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll put in the show notes how people can, connect with that. And I think that that's just really important because I think, a lot of people ask me questions about, what technology,
Mhm.
how AI influences clinical medicine and certainly healing and things like that. So this would be one of those tools that would be, at no matter where, like you mentioned, because you began meditating when your mom was terminally ill.
Right.
right? And so even if an individual's facing terminal illness themselves.
Most definitely. I think that's when having, a practice that helps you get in touch with something that's bigger than yourself in whatever format that might be. It could be religion, it could be, recognizing that, this universe is bigger than just little old me, and understanding that, can be a source of comfort, particularly when you're in the process of recognizing that the time we have is finite.
Yeah.
And even the belief around that finite life, when you start to really recognize what that looks like, it's also very, interesting. Um, I recently spent some time with Robert Thurman, the author of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and found his work to be extremely interesting, on so many levels, because when you're in that liminal space, when you're in that that time before death, when you recognize that this physical body might be coming to an end, but what's next? It's a fascinating mind shift.
Mhm. It is. Jane Goodall spoke of that a lot in the last year of her life, and, she did a there is a special put out where she did an interview that aired after her passing.
Oh, interesting. I have to watch that.
It was fantastic, and,
Oh, I want
yep,
to see that.
and she, not so, and I'm drawn to the natural world a lot
Mm,
and to the
mhm,
Celtic world, and really at my soul and in my soul, I really am a Celtic healer type of person, and that's really been fun. So the meditation that comes there in that, realm. And one of the things that I've learned that's always, been a great comfort and support to me is being able to sit quietly for 5 minutes
mm,
and, understanding as the thoughts come through, you just don't attach to them, right?
right.
And that's the same thing as coming back, and I would imagine I came back to a focal point, I did, and usually it was breath, and usually just a stillness I could see and feel and get centered with, and when and that I remember when I started that, boy, I squirmed a lot and just was I'm like, "I'm sure it's not gonna work, and whose idea was this?" And now, that happens very easily. And then as you look at some of the aspects of Celtic, uh, beliefs, which is really kind of the oldest religion, which is fascinating, and then the shamanic work that can go along with that, you spend time in the liminal spaces a lot.
Oh, interesting.
And
Tell
it's
me more about that. I don't know much about Celtic.
yeah, well, it's I don't either, to be quite honest. Exquisitely vast.
Mm,
But, coming out of Northern Europe, the Gales out of, middle upper North Europe, and then you've got the Scandinavians as well as, Scotland and the British Isles, and really kind of in there, and it was a religion that was well established in folk medicine,
mm,
folklore, in gods and goddesses and beliefs of the universe and of, sacredness of man. And then it kinda got wiped out during the rise of imperial religion across Europe.
mm,
And so that had to do with the March of Constantine and, the canonization and different things that occurred all for the state to control beliefs versus, people that had a belief system where they lived in harmony with the earth and with one another. And at the heart of it was the sacredness of man and the sacredness of the earth and everything being sacred.
beautiful.
And so imagine that getting turned upside down and then that still surviving. And it's interesting because what I found is when I did meditation, and one of the areas I entered in with meditation was contemplative prayer
Mm, 'kay.
and sitting quietly. And when that occurred, I kept being drawn deeper and deeper into different ages. It's like, well, it's not just 1976 when this was kind of, came about, not just the 1800s. It's not just back to, middle ages. I just kept getting pulled back deeper and deeper and keep thinking, this, I just, feel that it goes way back. And that's really then how I understood and was like, oh, there's this whole concept of the Celtic beliefs and Celtic spirituality.
Mm,
And once I got back there, as I, opened my awareness up, it's like that's just where I anchored. I'm like,
mm,
"Oh, I get this." Fascinating,
mm.
And, so I think, looking at that from a meditation standpoint and looking at, um, the effects of how that has has I think we use a lot of different words for meditation sometimes.
As you're describing what resonates with you, I'm thinking of forest bathing, which is this Japanese practice of walking through nature and,
Mm,
connecting in whatever way is resonates with you.
yeah.
I know for me, it's vital for me to be in nature every day. If I don't have some sort of connection to the earth, don't feel grounded in my body. And so that seems to be something that is part of most cultures, at some indigenous people. Celtic seems to have that thread running through it. This Japanese forest bathing. It seems to be throughout human
Yeah.
nature. And I think that when we find things that come up over and over again in different places, it's because it's a universal truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that rings true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That absolutely rings true. Okay, so let's see. I have blasted through and around my bullet points. So let me
Well,
go ahead.
you know what? I would tell you that, and this is what I'm curious about, that you talked about this idea of coming through a life cycle and getting to this Saturn rising. What the universal truth for me is this idea of midlife, and this idea of, you know, Jung called it the midlife awakening. We call it a midlife crisis. There's, Lao Tzu that had this idea of wanderers coming through and, having this time to leave the householder. This seems to be a universal truth as well, and I'm curious how that resonate, like, what you know about that from a Saturn rising, because it seems to be part of the same thread.
It does, and it's interesting because I took, some questions that would lead us in a conversation, and then I wrote one big question. Do you
Mm,
think midlife is a curse or an opportunity? And here we are, right at that question.
there we go. Yeah.
So, yeah, so, the Saturn return is
Yeah.
just a cycle that's
Mhm.
set in the stars and our birth chart. It's
Okay.
calculated. And folks who are gifted and skilled in astrology know how to read the sun, the moon, and the stars.
Okay.
And I have availed myself, as my husband, to folks who are well trained and really know their work to different points in our life. There's things we can figure out by the stars where is the best place for us to live on this planet. That's called
Mm,
astrocartography.
interesting.
And then there's just there's astrology and there's variations on all that theme. There's the Enneagram, and you can put that with astrology, and just so many wonderful tools to gain insight for guidance and things that become a point of awareness, a point of growth, a point of, oh, that's why that's happening. That's why I keep seeing that lesson.
Mm,
Yeah, I need to take care of that. Haven't really done that. And you look back, and then it's interesting because even in the literature on PTSD, they
mhm,
talk about things occurring in 7-year cycles.
mhm.
And so it's kind of like, okay, there's just cycles. And I've had even 11-year cycles mapped out that certain things happen again and again. I always just paid attention to that. And I think pattern recognition is just one of the things I do. So it was super easy. And so I do think that there's these opportunities at midlife that we're meant to pay attention to. And if we don't, I do think it's like the continental divide. The continental divide divides the continents. You stand at the very top of the continental divide, you go one way, and there's just a natural flow of everything. You can't fight that. That's the natural law that follows.
Right.
You go the other direction, it just flows the other way, and you can't fight that. And the continental divide, I think metaphorically is there. I know it's there geologically and geographically, but metaphorically it's there for us to, when we come at a point of decision, we make the decision and then everything else after that's a natural flow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so and there's never a bad decision, it's just a decision because you don't really know what's next. And I think one of the things I gained about all these cycles and meditation was the ability to be comfortable with the uncomfortable
Yeah.
and the ability to become comfortable with uncertainty. Because it's like, what's coming next if I'm sitting here? What's going to happen? What's going to pop in? What, who, what, I can't, no, I can't sit this still. All those things. And really, I think at the heart of it, we're anticipating or anxious, meaning asking for more information about what's next.
Right. I think there's that illusion of control that we all have as humans, right? So we all want to have that sense of, well, if I do this, then that will happen next. And so we live our lives, it's pattern recognition. As a little kid, I did this and my mommy gave me a lollipop. And so if I keep doing this, then maybe I can get my lollipop. And so we go around life looking for the next lollipop. And we got it as a kid and so we expect the same behavior to work. And sometimes those adaptive behaviors as kids don't necessarily work today. So it's fascinating to me. That's what to me midlife gives us is the ability to say, hey, I did have a lot of those patterns as a kid. And the control that I think I have when I keep repeating them isn't really working for me anymore. I get to try a new pattern. This is a shift for me.
Yeah.
That lollipop isn't there anymore.
Mhm.
And yeah. Yeah, so to me, midlife is like this fabulously wonderful opportunity because 'cause you've been doing the same thing over and over and over again, and a lot of people get there and they're like, "Well, this isn't working for me," and so they think, "Ah, time to buy a Porsche," or, "Time to leave everything behind and go travel the world," or whatever it is, but ultimately, that finding yourself, that authenticity that we get when we get to a certain age, coming home to what truly lights you up,
Mhm.
that is the ability that, if we're lucky, we get to discover.
Yes. Yes. And then do you think that, and certainly this is something that I've often, I care for and I'm careful to share with my patients is that
Mm.
when things happen to you, rarely, if ever, is it your fault. Because if you're not aware of it, how can it be your fault? It's only when you're aware of it and choose to like do it over and over again, right?
Yeah, it's such an interesting that idea of fault, in meditation, we believe very strongly in this compassion practice, this idea of really loving yourself and recognizing that we all mess up. Every single one of us is human. We do it over and over again. And of course, it's not your fault. Of course, it's not your fault. And then if you continue, as you said, to still make those same mistakes, even then, there's so much that's happening below the line, that you're just not aware of. That's what meditation helps us do. It helps us bring it above the line. It helps us see, oh yeah,
Mhm.
that's coming from me. I'm gonna get my lollipop or whatever that might be. Right. And I have so much um compassion for myself first, because I think if we judge ourselves harshly, then we're gonna be doing it to everybody else. I think when we start to understand how human we all are,
Mhm.
then we have a lot more compassion for the people around us.
Mhm. Do you think that the challenges that you went through,
Mm.
do you think you were self-compassionate, not judgmental prior to that? stuff all kinda come up?
Oh, this has been an evolution, right? It's not like one and done, you know? I think that when I was in my 30s and something bad happened, I was shooting and, shoulda, coulda, woulda all over myself.
Yep.
So I was really not easy on myself. And now I I don't know what, obviously there's stuff that I might mess up on, but of course I recognize that all of us do. So of course I'm much softer today than I was then. Um, I also think, listen, I had cancer. I had 2 cancer scares, and I think that having a um, a brush with my own mortality really gave me a sense of what was important.
I think
I
that's
think, like,
I
yeah.
think yeah, I think that that's true. And speaking of brush with so many things, you had the app was all available during the pandemic.
Yes. Oh, yes. Mhm.
So share with me, I'm just curious what happened during the pandemic with all of this.
Pandemic was such an interesting period of time for so many reasons. Should we start with loneliness? Should we start with, I mean, what I find so fascinating about that sense of people who were alone weren't necessarily lonely.
Mhm,
I can say, if I can talk about myself for a second, when I was going through, the pandemic, I was also that was when I was diagnosed and going through treatment. And it was a really interesting time because there was like this thing inside of me that I was told could be fatal, but there was also this thing out there that was also dangerous. And there was, and the hospital that I was receiving my treatment in was also ground central for COVID. So that feeling of danger,
mhm,
potential danger, and being needing to isolate and having to stay away from people, um, was an interesting idea because it wasn't necessarily true.
mhm,
You know, there was um, there was this period of time where people were so terrified, and it was rightfully so in certain cases. And then, you know, that that idea of just being of creating this culture of loneliness that has become so prevalent for so many of us now as a result of it. So I find that COVID was a very interesting time, and what was very helpful was things like Zoom calls, right? Or apps,
mhm.
because all of a sudden technology became this ability that gave us the ability to interconnect or to connect with people in a very meaningful way that probably wasn't as available to us before
Yeah,
Right.
and I would think too that because of the anxiety around all of that state,
Mm.
I mean, that would be
Yeah. So anxiety is such an interesting thing. Of course, people were anxious,
yeah,
of course, and of course, people on so many levels. There were so many things that happened to so many people during COVID, right? So obviously, anxiety was a huge part of it. Also, this whole, women having to carry the lion's share of household um, duties, if you will, and, being responsible for work jobs and also home jobs. And so there was a lot of people, and then illness, people that had illnesses that had all of the anxiety, but also all of um, the practices that we could help support them
mhm,
with something that was an app. So people who weren't sleeping, people who were feeling lonely, creating community, allowing people to have opportunities to connect with themselves, recognizing that there's a difference between being alone and feeling lonely, um, which I think is a big thing. That yeah. Yeah.
it is, and the research is pretty solid now that loneliness is an independent risk factor for an early mortality.
Yeah. What is it, like, equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day? So, yeah. Yeah.
So that's significant. That's
Yeah.
significant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I think that, this has been absolutely fascinating to talk about this because, again, what strikes me is that, and it's not even a paradox, but the simplicity and yet the profound, impact of what you've brought to the world in a technology way. And I really am appreciative of that you had the vision to do that you had the entrepreneurial spirit to do that, and that you really had determination because behind all those good ideas, I'll tell you what, there is a lot of steps that go up and down and in and out before anything gets to market and gets to market well and gets to market successfully and gets to get around the world. So well done by sticking to it. That's a lot of determination and a lot of doggedness, as I call it, to really follow something through. So I know what it takes to do that, and so I just really wanna honor you for doing that and bringing to the world something that has been such a gift and such a tool and so helpful to transform lives. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for taking some time out to share your story with us today. I appreciate it very much.
Alright, it's great to meet you, and I'm gonna go do my research now on us.
Love Saturn spinning around. That sounds good. Report back. Tell me what's next. But thank you very much. We'll see you
Thank you.
soon. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Our guest today, Lynne Goldberg, reminded us that meditation isn't just about stillness, it's about meeting life exactly where we are. Her story is powerful. It's a testament to what's possible when we choose presence, even during pain. So, if today's conversation stirred something in you, I hope you'll sit with it, breathe with it, let it take root. You can learn more about Lynne and her work at her website, lynnegoldbergmeditation.com. Otherwise, please rate and review this podcast wherever you listen. Let us hear from you if you have questions or feedback. Thanks for listening. Be well, and we will see you next time. That's a wrap for this episode of the Dr. Mary Louder podcast show. I hope you've heard something today that made you think, laugh, or say, well, now that was a plot twist I didn't expect. Just remember, your health journey is more than lab results and supplements. It's spirit, soul, and story, and sometimes a gadget or two you probably should have returned. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please share our podcast with someone you love. If you didn't like the show, well, maybe don't tell anybody then. And if you want more soulful medicine, curious conversations, and tools that actually help, visit me anytime at drmarylouder.com. Until next time, stay kind and stay curious. Music today is provided by Mr. Dave Evans. He composed, played, and engineered this song specifically for our podcast, and it's called Soul Strings, an acoustic reflection of the healing path. Thanks, Dave. It's great music.